The son of hip-hop royalty is now caught in a scandal no one saw coming. Most people know CJ Wallace as the son of one of the greatest rappers to ever live, the Notorious B.I.G. To fans. His legacy, familiarity, and a symbol of what could have been. He's played Biggie in flicks, paid tribute on stage, and tried to build his own career outside the shadow of a father he barely got to know. But in the summer of 2025, everything changed. Shocking allegations tied CJ Wallace to one of the darkest and most controversial stories in modern hip-hop history. Diddy's disturbing legal downfall. Lawsuits started flying. Headlines lit up. And before long, CJ's name was being plastered all over tabloids, blogs, and clickbait posts, painting him as a potential accomplice to something unthinkable. According to one lawsuit, Wallace didn't just know about an alleged assault. He was accused of helping make it happen. But that was just the beginning, because soon after, CJ fired back, launching a shocking defamation lawsuit that flipped the entire narrative. He claimed the man behind the original accusations wasn't just lying but was out for revenge. A washed-up music producer with a twisted reason for dragging Wallace's name through the mud. Suddenly, this wasn't just about justice or guilt. It was about betrayal, broken deals, industry wars, and whether someone had just tried to destroy the name of Biggie Small's only son. So what's real, and what's weaponized fiction? Tonight we dive deep into the story behind the headlines. We'll unpack who CJ Wallace really is, explore his secret music beefs, and reveal what insiders are saying about his connection to Diddy's downfall. Because this isn't just a scandal, it might be the unraveling of a legacy, or the rise of someone ready to step out of his father's massive shadow. Let's get into it. Before the headlines, before the lawsuits, before he became the center of public scandal, CJ Wallace was simply known as the son of a legend. Born Christopher Jordan Wallace in 1996, CJ came into the world just months before his father, the Notorious B.I.G, was tragically killed. Most people know Biggie as a hip-hop icon, the voice behind Juicy and Mo Money Mo Problems. But to CJ, he was a missing father, a memory he mostly saw through grainy music videos and whispered stories. His mother, R&B singer Faith Evans, tried to give him a normal life, as normal as you can when your parents are literal music royalty. Still, CJ grew up with the burden that most celebrity kids quietly face: fame by association, expectations without achievements, and a last name that opened doors but also locked him into someone else's story. As a teenager, he dipped his toes into the entertainment world. In 2009, CJ famously played his own father in the film Notorious, a role that instantly made headlines. Despite his youth, critics noted the weight he carried. It wasn't acting ... it was legacy. But it wasn't long before CJ tried to blaze his own trail. He got into music, releasing experimental tracks and eventually adopting the nickname Lil Biggie, a name loaded with both tribute and pressure. Some loved it, others accused him of riding coattails he never asked to wear. It was a tough crowd, and CJ seemed to know it. He rarely gave interviews and kept his circle tight. Beyond music, he quietly became an entrepreneur, launching his own cannabis and wellness brand, Think Big, centered around activism, equity, and honoring his father's life. He co-created the Frank White clothing line and even helped produce documentaries detailing the East Coast-West Coast rap wars of the 90s. In other words, he wasn't trying to become the next Biggie, he was trying to preserve him, with purpose. Still, through all of this, CJ remained low-key, more ghost than celebrity, rarely spotted at events, rarely involved in industry drama, which is why what happened in 2025 hit so hard. No one expected CJ Wallace, the quiet son, the tribute maker, the legacy keeper, to be suddenly accused of aiding one of the most alleged disturbing acts pinned to Diddy. So how exactly did things spiral so far from legacy into scandal? Keep watching, because the connection between CJ and Diddy goes deeper than most people realize. To understand the weight of these allegations against CJ Wallace, you have to go all the way back to the bond between Sean Diddy Combs and Christopher Biggie Wallace. Diddy wasn't just Biggie's producer, he was his mentor, business partner, and close friend. Together they built Bad Boy Records, redefined the sound of East Coast hip-hop, and changed the music industry in the 90s. When Biggie died in 1997, Diddy was devastated and made it his mission to protect, promote, and preserve his friend's legacy. And that included stepping into CJ Wallace's life. In the early 2000s, CJ referred to Diddy as Uncle Puff, an affectionate title that showed just how close their families had grown. Diddy helped raise millions for Biggie's estate, worked with Faith Evans on tribute songs, and was often seen supporting CJ at events. For years, It looked like CJ might even step into a role at Bad Boy, following in his father's footsteps. There were throwback interviews, tributes, even mentorship whispers. At one point, insiders claimed Diddy was grooming CJ to be the future face of Biggie's brand, but somewhere along the way, things started shifting. Biggie's legacy became more than music, it became business. Documentaries, merch, posthumous releases, rebranded albums. Each project carried Big's name. But who had real control behind the scenes? There were quiet rumors about power struggles. Who decides which unreleased verses get put out? Which brand campaigns are truly honoring Biggie and which are simply cash grabs? CJ, despite being Biggie's only son, may have had less creative say than the public realized. And then there was the distance. By the time Diddy's controversies started bubbling up in the 2020s, CJ wasn't anywhere near him publicly. No collabs, no birthday shoutouts, no hammer tags. It was subtle, but noticeable. Fans began to wonder, had Uncle Puff and CJ grown apart? Insiders hinted at a quiet rift. Some claim CJ chose to focus on his wellness company and private projects, steering clear of Diddy's glitzy, drama-filled empire. Others believe CJ wasn't comfortable aligning with Diddy's increasingly controversial brand. So when a lawsuit dropped in July 2025 claiming CJ Wallace had actively lured someone into one of Diddy's most grotesque alleged assaults, it felt like a contradiction, like a betrayal, like a setup. How could someone who appeared so distant from Diddy's world be named as a key player in his unraveling? Or was that distance just a public illusion? Either way, the timeline didn't lie. And everything changed the moment CJ's name hit that lawsuit. Next, what exactly was in those explosive accusations? The story takes a disturbing turn. It started with a whisper. Then the internet exploded. In July 2025, a lawsuit surfaced that sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. At first glance, it seemed like just another blow in the long line of disturbing allegations aimed at Sean Diddy Combs. But this wasn't just about him. The lawsuit named someone else, someone unexpected. CJ Wallace, the son of the Notorious B.I.G, the man who had kept himself far from drama, suddenly accused of playing a role in something heinous. The filing came from a then anonymous man, described only as a music industry insider. According to court documents, he claimed he was invited to a location connected to Revolt TV, a network founded by Diddy. What he didn't expect, though, was the experience that followed. He alleged that once he arrived, he was ambushed, taken into a private room where Diddy himself was waiting, according to the complaint. Members of Diddy's inner circle, henchmen as the documents described, then physically restrained him as Combs allegedly tried to force a disturbing act on him. But the detail that really set the internet ablaze. The lawsuit claims CJ Wallace helped lure him there. Allegedly, CJ played the role of the friendly contact, a familiar face without red flags. That is, until this anonymous plaintiff said Wallace was the one who led him into the situation, knowing what would happen next. Even more shocking were claims that Wallace attended private parties dubbed freak-offs hosted by Diddy. These weren't new rumors. Whispers of disturbing, elite-only gatherings had circled Diddy for years, but attaching CJ's name to them, that changed everything. The media went into full meltdown. Biggie's son dragged into Diddy's scandal. CJ Wallace named in graphic suit involving Diddy legacy in crisis. Notorious B.I.G's son accused. For fans who grew up seeing CJ as quiet, humble, and legacy-focused, the story didn't make sense. Sure, he was Diddy adjacent, but up until now he had managed to live a life relatively scandal-free. No arrests, no outbursts, no reality TV chaos. So why would he be involved in something this extreme? Some fans called it a shakedown. Others said CJ must have known more than he let on, but behind the scenes, CJ's legal team was already moving fast. Because while the public was busy debating whether Biggie's son had dark secrets, CJ Wallace was preparing for a full-on legal counterattack, one that would not only deny the claims, but also expose the man behind them. And when that man's identity was revealed, everything changed again. Coming up next, who is Jonathan Hay, and why was he hiding his name? You won't believe how deep this goes. When reports first surfaced of a disturbing lawsuit against CJ Wallace and Diddy, all anyone knew about the plaintiff was that he was anonymous. But that didn't last long. Very soon, media outlets confirmed the identity behind the mask. Jonathan Hay, a name that rang bells across the music industry. To the public, it was a surprising twist. But for those who knew the backstory between Hay and CJ Wallace, it felt like unfinished business boiling over. So, who is Jonathan Hay? A veteran music producer and publicist, Hay spent decades hovering on the fringes of fame. He worked with artists in hip-hop, underground R&B, and pop, often promoting himself as the guy who helped launch careers. Some credited him for early media work with Rihanna and other illicit. He also dipped into projects involving Kanye West, Tech N9ne, and other hip-hop oddities, leaning into controversy as a branding tactic. But his career has often walked the blurry line between genius and chaos. His name has appeared in past legal incidents involving industry contracts, and he's known for erratic behavior in interviews and social media blasts. That same unpredictability followed him when, in 2020, he linked up with CJ Wallace. At the time, Wallace was focused on carving an identity beyond just being Biggie's son. He wanted to build something in music, not just in name. So when Hay approached him with a concept for a tribute/modern fusion project, it seemed like a fresh opportunity. They reportedly collaborated on a single track, planned a rollout with a mini EP, and quietly teased it as a modern revival of Biggie's soul through CJ's voice and Hay's production. But behind the scenes, things fell apart fast. According to Wallace's later court documents, the project flopped commercially. The single underperformed, streaming numbers flatlined, and reviews were lukewarm at best. When that happened, Wallace's team claims he withdrew from the collaboration entirely, choosing not to move forward with the rest of the tracks. Hay, on the other hand, allegedly took it hard. What started as a professional split seemed to spiral into something personal. CJ's legal complaint later described increasingly unstable and erratic behavior by Hay, including aggressive communication, emotional outbursts, and thinly veiled threats. For a while, nothing surfaced publicly, just radio silence. But lawyers now argue this was the moment resentment started brewing, and years later, Hay re-emerged, not as a collaborator but as an accuser. And that's when the industry started asking questions. Was this truly a survivor speaking up about something unspeakable? Or was it a disgruntled partner, playing the role of victim with a much more calculated goal in mind? One thing was certain, CJ Wallace wasn't going to take it quietly, because what happened after this was rare in the music world. A countersuit that flipped the entire narrative and pushed back against cancel culture in real time. But what exactly was CJ's side of the story? Up next, the counterattack. CJ Wallace files a lawsuit of his own, and what he revealed raised even more eyebrows. When CJ Wallace's name hit the headlines linked to Diddy's growing legal nightmare, the internet took it as fact. But CJ wasn't staying silent. Just weeks after the allegations went public, Wallace launched a full-blown defamation lawsuit against Jonathan Hay, the man who once called him a creative partner, and was now dragging him through the mud in one of the year's most disturbing lawsuits. And this wasn't just a press release. This was personal. Wallace's legal team moved fast, filing court documents that called the accusations against him out for exactly what they were. In his words, malicious lies designed to wreck his credibility, destroy his legacy, and punish him for a past that Hay couldn't let go of. According to the lawsuit, obtained by outlets like TMZ and Complex, Wallace didn't just question Hay's version of events. He accused Hay of inventing an entire false reality, one motivated not by truth, but by revenge. Hay acted with actual malice, knowing the statements were false or with reckless disregard for their truth or falsity. That's straight from the filing. Wallace made it clear, he had no role in any assault. He didn't lure anyone. He didn't attend any of Diddy's freak-off parties. In fact, he hadn't even been in close contact with Diddy in recent years. The idea that he had coordinated any sort of setup was, in his words, not just false but slanderous and destructive. He claimed the entire turn of events sprung from 2020 when their joint music project collapsed, and he chose to distance himself both creatively and professionally. That decision, Wallace's team said, infuriated Hay, whose career had been stagnating, who'd invested time and money, and who allegedly began sending aggressive messages to Wallace after the track failed to chart. Instead of accepting that the project was over, CJ contends, Hay waited and plotted, and when Diddy's world started to publicly unravel, Hay apparently saw a spotlight he could step into a lawsuit that would make headlines, and paint him as a survivor rather than a bitter, jilted collaborator. The lawsuit paints Hay's story as calculated, rehearsed, and carefully timed, a personal vendetta, disguised as a cry for justice. But in court, Wallace wasn't just fighting to clear his name. He was also drawing a hard line between reality and revision. Because in this new era of viral cancellations, one anonymous accusation is all it takes to destroy a reputation overnight. And for CJ Wallace, this wasn't just business. It was the weight of a last name that already comes with ghosts, tragedy and now, scandal. But legal wars don't play out clean in the public eye. And while CJ Wallace's lawsuit was making headlines of its own, the story under the surface, the why behind Jonathan Hayes' sudden turn, kept getting murkier, because it turns out, this legal feud had been building long before the world ever heard about it. Next up, the failed music deal that may have lit the fuse on this entire situation, and why Wallace claims Hay let his obsession spiral. Long before they were facing off in court, CJ Wallace and Jonathan Hay had a shared vision, or at least, that's how it started. Back in 2020, when Wallace was still carving his own space in hip-hop, he partnered up with music producer and publicist Jonathan Hay on a passion project. The idea to craft a new kind of sound, a modern tribute to his father's legacy blended with contemporary hip-hop and moody aesthetics. It was the kind of concept that screamed potential. The media started to pay quiet attention, and he promoted it like it was about to change the industry. There were teasers, reels, social blurbs, a tribute to the late Biggie with his son behind the mic, guided by an industry veteran with decades of production under his belt. It sounded like a made-for-Spotify moment, but then, it dropped, and the response was lukewarm at best. The track failed to gain serious traction. Streaming numbers were disappointing, TikTok ignored it. The campaign fizzled out before it even sparked. And according to documents from Wallace's legal team, he wasn't about to waste time on a project that already showed no commercial pulse. That's when everything changed. Wallace allegedly made the call to stop the process entirely. No EP, no rollout, no press. One single, and the collab was dead. From a business standpoint, maybe it made sense, but it was personal, and devastating. Reports claim Hay had sunk his own resources into promoting the project, funding studio time, graphics, and pushing press to take the project seriously. He was banking on this release to boost his reputation, maybe even revive it. Instead, he got silence. Industry blogs began to quietly whisper about backstage tension, vague posts on forums, mysterious tweets hinting at a falling out. One article mentioned creative disagreements, another simply said the EP is no longer moving forward. No names, no details, just smoke. Behind the scenes though, Wallace's team claims Hay didn't take the rejection well. Messages became aggressive. There were signs of obsession, emails, calls, dramatic language being thrown around over an unreleased track. The one-time promoter had turned mad about being shut out. According to Wallace's lawsuit, this failed collaboration is the root of everything. He believes Hay held onto that grudge for 5 years, just waiting for the right firestorm to throw his accusations into. And when Diddy's legal walls started crumbling, Hay allegedly used the moment to make his move, aligning CJ with Diddy in the most damaging way possible. And here's what makes this darker. Instead of just accusing CJ of ghosting him, failing on business terms, or being an unprofessional team member, Hay went nuclear, throwing allegations of assault and criminal involvement, knowing full well the headlines that would follow. In Wallace's eyes, this isn't a case of a man speaking his truth. This is calculated revenge, dressed up as justice. But whether the world believes him or not, it's already too late. His name is out there, side by side with one of the biggest scandals in the industry. And Diddy's role in that mess, well, it's a lot heavier than headlines have even scratched. Next, Diddy's downward spiral, how the hip-hop mogul's fall from grace has scorched everyone around him, even those who weren't in the room. While CJ Wallace's legal drama is making headlines, the truth is, his story is just one part of a much bigger collapse. Because right now, Sean Diddy Combs is experiencing one of the most catastrophic downfalls in hip-hop history, and the ripple effect is devastating everyone in his orbit. Years ago, Diddy was untouchable, mogul, entrepreneur, the face of Bad Boy Records and an empire that stretched into fashion, liquor, television, and culture itself. His influence was undeniable. His reach went beyond music, political events, private parties, global deals. He was the blueprint. But starting in the early 2020s, cracks began to show, and by 2024, the dam holding Diddy's empire together had fully collapsed. Allegations poured in, lawsuits centered around manipulation, substance-fueled coercion, and disturbing claims involving young industry hopefuls. Former assistants, artists, and staff came forward to paint a haunting picture of what was happening behind closed doors. In a shocking turn of events, Diddy was sentenced to 50 months in prison after being found guilty on charges related to prostitution and the abuse of power within his companies. The conviction shook the industry. Suddenly, years of whispers were landing on court dockets. What used to be rumor had become record, and just like that, Diddy's fortress fell. Sponsors dropped him. Brands severed ties overnight. His media empire stripped clean. Streaming services began re-evaluating content he was tied to. Even bad boy alumni and artists who once praised him began reconsidering their loyalty. And that's where CJ Wallace's controversy enters the story. Because once Diddy became a legal and cultural liability, any name attached to him, past or present, came under scrutiny. CJ was one of those names. Growing up, he was connected to Diddy through his father's legacy. That family bond, that industry proximity, made him a natural target when the media started mapping out Diddy's world. But the question is, was CJ actually involved, or just collateral damage? Wallace insists he hasn't been close with Diddy in years. In fact, his lawsuit argues that the assumption of closeness is part of the problem, that people, including Jonathan Hay, are weaponizing that perceived relationship to falsely tie CJ to crimes he had no part in. But once your name is in the headlines, tied to someone under federal investigation and global cancellation, it doesn't really matter what the truth is. The damage is done, and CJ Wallace isn't the only one caught in the fallout. Other public figures who once aligned with Diddy, producers, choreographers, ex-girlfriends, creative directors, have been publicly accused, investigated, or questioned. Even those who are miles away from any wrongdoing are being forced to defend themselves, simply because of past associations. It's gotten so toxic. Some insiders say being part of Diddy's circle, even 5 or 10 years ago, feels like career quicksand. The real question is whether all of this is part of a long overdue reckoning, or if innocent people are being destroyed just for having a name on the wrong contact list. Because at this point, no one seems safe, and CJ Wallace, son of rap's most beloved legend, may be one of the loudest cautionary tales in that chaos. But while the Diddy saga continues to drag more names into its dark depths, the internet has latched onto one name in particular, and it's not letting go. Coming up, what the internet really thinks about CJ Wallace, the support, the slander, and a YouTube firestorm that made everything 10x worse. When the lawsuit dropped and CJ Wallace's name was dragged into one of the most explosive scandals of the decade, social media did what it always does. It lost its mind. Shock, confusion, full-on chaos. At first, people couldn't believe it. Biggie's son, the quiet one, the guy who mostly stayed behind the scenes. The headlines didn't make sense, but for some, that just made them even more interesting. Within hours, CJ Wallace was trending. On Twitter, the hot takes came fast. Some were sympathetic. Leave CJ Wallace out of this. He's been chill his whole life. This feels like a setup. Others weren't so forgiving. He had to know what was going on. No way you're that close to Diddy and that clueless. And then came the meme wave, half joking, half cynical. Photoshopped pictures of Wallace in shady rooms. Edits of him at imaginary freak-off parties. Conspiracy-laced TikToks combining old video clips of Diddy events and AI-generated nonsense, painting CJ as some kind of hidden gatekeeper of an A-list secret society. The comment sections got ugly fast. One moment, CJ was the son of a legend. The next, he was the internet's latest villain, a supposed silent enabler of dark celebrity secrets. But nothing stirred the storm quite like YouTube. Within days, a rabbit hole had formed. Dozens of creators began uploading speculative breakdowns with titles like, "The Dark Truth About CJ Wallace's Connection to Diddy's Empire Exposed. Was Biggie's son part of the underground scene?" Why CJ Wallace wasn't just a bystander. Some of them posed real questions, others full-blown fiction dressed up as investigation. They'd splice together out-of-context footage, attach dramatic music, and ask open-ended questions designed to spark fear, not truth. One popular channel racked up 1 million views in 3 days by simply looping the phrase, "What if CJ's silence meant guilt all along?" And here's the problem. None of these videos had any real evidence, not one exclusive quote. No court documents, just speculation, designed for clicks. But in the age of viral outrage, you don't need facts to shape public opinion. Just a few suspicious headlines. And a name people recognize. Even more frustrating for CJ, defending yourself doesn't go viral, but being accused does. As his legal team pushed back in court, calling Jonathan Hay's claims outright lies, the internet was already forming its own verdict, and in that world, nuance doesn't trend. The whole thing raised a chilling question. How easy is it to ruin someone's reputation in 2025? Simply because they're connected to someone who fell from grace. Coming up next, behind all the noise and rumors, who is CJ Wallace really? Can he ever escape the name tied to his father's legend? And now, to scandal. CJ Wallace has spent his entire life trying to exist beyond 3 words, Biggie's son. From the moment he was born, the world expected him to carry a legacy that wasn't just iconic, it was untouchable. The Notorious B.I.G. wasn't just a rapper, he was a symbol, a martyr of East Coast hip-hop, a lyrical king gone too soon. And for millions, CJ wasn't a person, he was a reminder of what the culture lost, a reminder of what Big could have become, a reminder of a past that demanded a future, through him. And for years, CJ tried to honor that without becoming trapped by it. He acted, even portraying his father in the biopic Notorious. He created businesses launching wellness brands and apparel lines rooted in cannabis reform, criminal justice awareness, and black ownership. He dipped into music, carefully choosing his pace, never rushing into the spotlight, never cashing out on the nostalgia everyone expected him to milk. But the shadow was always there. The magazine features still opened with Son of Biggie. The TV interviews still circled back to questions about his dad, not about him. His last name wasn't just recognition, it was a spotlight and a microscope. And now, it's a target. This lawsuit didn't just drag CJ's name through public scandal, it pulled him right back into the darkest, most controversial corners of the hip-hop world his father once ruled. The parties, the labels, the people who blurred the lines between business and power, the same world that swallowed Biggie at the peak of his rise, has now erupted again, and CJ is right back in the eye of the storm. But here's the real twist. CJ Wallace never asked for any of this. He didn't build Bad Boy, he didn't sign the deals, he didn't run the freak-off parties or establish the media circus around Diddy. All he did, at least according to his legal defense, was try to walk his own path. And now, he could still lose everything. Because in this industry, legacy doesn't just give you fans, it gives you enemies, and expectations, and traps. There's a reason so many celebrity kids crash. And not always because of recklessness. Sometimes it's because they recast in roles the world wrote for them before they even had a choice. CJ spent years proving he wasn't Biggie 2.0, but now Twitter threads, YouTube videos, and lawsuits are pulling him backward into a version of hip-hop's past that he didn't create, but can't seem to escape. So that raises the question, is this his breaking point, or the moment he finally breaks free? Because what happens next could define whether CJ Wallace is more than just his father's son, or if the world will always keep him there. Next, one final look at the war behind the headlines. What if Wallace is telling the truth, and this was never justice, just perfectly timed revenge? By now, most people have chosen a side. They've already decided if CJ Wallace is innocent, the quiet son unfairly thrown into someone else's scandal, or guilty by association, part of a deeper, darker scene no one really talks about publicly. But beneath the noise, beneath the hashtags, memes, reactions, and rage, there's a question that very few are asking out loud. If Jonathan Hay is lying, why go this far? His accusations weren't vague. They were vivid, graphic, incredibly disturbing. No tabloid-level fluff. These were specific claims about what happened, when it happened, what he saw, and who was there. So if this was all made up, as CJ's legal team insists, why risk everything to make such strong allegations? Clout, revenge, delusion, or the question nobody wants to consider, could there be some truth in the mix, no matter how twisted the context? But flip it around. If Hay's story was true, why wait 5 years to come forward? Why not report it when it happened back in 2020, when both he and Wallace were still actively working together? That's where the timeline gets murky. Even legal experts have started weighing in, trying to decode the strategy unfolding in real time. Wallace's defamation countersuit doesn't just deny the accusations, it accuses Hay of deliberately using the court system to broadcast a lie for the sake of revenge. Some lawyers say the case could be dismissed just based on intent. Others believe it might open the door to even more exposure. From both sides, settlement, dismissal, courtroom fireworks. No one knows yet, and that's what makes all of this so dangerous. Because behind the headlines, industry insiders are whispering that this isn't the last filing we'll see. There are rumors of more unsealed documents waiting on standby, more names mentioned quietly in private among lawyers, and more lawsuits potentially connected to Diddy's empire ready to surface. As the legal wars begin to close in, CJ Wallace remains at the epicenter, trying to claw his way out of a mess he claims he never helped create. In recent statements, he says he's focusing on one thing only, clearing his name, not just legally but publicly, personally, and permanently. But even if he wins the case, there's one thing every artist, entertainer, and legacy figure knows too well. Once public trust is shaken, it rarely comes back the same. And for someone who never asked to be famous in the first place, CJ Wallace may have finally learned the hardest truth of inherited fame. No matter how careful you are, the past has a way of finding you. And in today's world, scandal spreads faster than facts ever could. The world looks at the children of legends like they were born lucky. Fame, money, access, it all seems effortless from the outside. But what people never see is the weight those names carry. For CJ Wallace, being the son of one of hip-hop's greatest storytellers was never just about inheritance, it was about expectation and survival. From the moment he could walk, CJ was tied to a legacy he never chose. A legacy built on brilliance but surrounded by tragedy, violence, and the kind of fame that leaves scars. Now, he finds himself in one of the industry's ugliest chapters, accused of something horrific, and forced to fight not just for his image, but for his identity. He could be innocent, he could be misunderstood, or he could just be another young artist caught in the crossfire of an industry that famously uses people until it doesn't need them anymore. Meanwhile, Diddy's empire is crumbling, lawsuits are stacking up, and the gatekeepers of old-school hip-hop are being dragged into the light, one after another. In that wreckage, names are being attached, reputations are being torched, and no name is immune, not even Biggie's, because in this era, nothing is too sacred to scandalize, not even legacy. So where does that leave CJ Wallace? Is he the next in a long line of fallen stars? Or the one who finally breaks the pattern? Is this the beginning of CJ Wallace's undoing? Or the moment he steps out of his father's shadow and into his own name at last? One thing's for sure, this story isn't over. Not by a long shot.